Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me so late on a Friday evening with such good weather outside. It's great to have you here. Hopefully you learned something this evening or find something interesting. I'm going to be talking about being a senior or being a software developer in the Netherlands. I don't know much about that. I'm from South Africa. I'm also a pretty terrible developer. But we did a pretty big survey. And these are the results of that survey. Some interesting data. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the questions, and I can unpack that stuff for you as we go. So hopefully it's interesting. Just shout if you have any questions or comments. So who are we? We're OfferZen. We're traditionally a South African company. We've been active in the Netherlands for a year now. We help developers grow in their careers. Primarily, that means helping developers get cool jobs at companies they didn't even know existed. So not the usual get a job at a bank, somewhere where they can make an impact. Talk a little bit about that in a bit. Just want to let you know you can get a t-shirt from us, like ASCII art, a bunch of different designs. Link is in the chat. And you can scan the QR or go to bit.ly claim swag if you want a t-shirt, because free stuff is fun. Cool, back to us, OfferZen. We do a bunch of things, as I mentioned, and all of these are based on the premise that the value in the world and of our business lives within the software developer community. So we help devs get jobs with other great devs. We help devs mentor other devs. We help devs create data through surveys and other means to help other devs, which is what we're going to be doing tonight. We have a blog. All the content on there is created by devs in the community, and all of our events are aimed at peer-to-peer type events. So we generally don't try and steer away from webinar type events. Love webinars, tweakers, but we like try and create connections between developers. That's kind of what we're trying to do at every turn. So jumping in, I'm going to be running you through some insights from the recent 2021 State of the Developer Nation report. Here's some screenshots of what it looks like on the actual web page, and you can download PDF of the report. This is a bit of a deep dive on it. Some of the insights are in the report, some are not, but just shout at the end if you all want the code. If you all want the URL to download this. What are we going to look at? We're going to look at background and education. So what are these devs that we speak of? Who are we, Dutch developers? Talk about skills and learning, look at languages, frameworks, trends, looking at new industries, and what developers are thinking about where the future is, and then looking later towards careers, career paths, how fast developers are moving, salaries, those kinds of things. So let's jump in. Cool. What is this dev you speak of? So when we first did the survey, I think this was one of the most interesting graphs that we did. Generally, throughout the presentation, the y-axis is a percentage representation of the respondents. There were about over 500 software developers in the Netherlands who responded to this one. And this one, for me, is quite interesting. So it is the distribution over years of experience. So the x-axis is years of experience buckets for the self-reported seniority. So the question was, what do you consider yourself, a junior, an intermediate, a senior, or a tech lead? So you can see over here that juniors are generally between 0 to 2 to 2 to 4. And once they start to hit the 4 to 6 brackets, people stop generally calling themselves juniors. And conversely, people that are around the 6 to 10 plus up to 10 plus years are starting to call themselves seniors or tech leads or management. So I think this is quite an interesting graph, one of the ones I wanted to start with, because it's quite a self-reported thing, right? There's no standard in this. We don't have a standard industry where it's like accounting or law, where you've got junior, very clear kind of reporting lines and career progress. So this is just a very good idea of when someone says they're looking for a senior developer, what does that actually mean? There's an answer. But what is quite interesting is that the answer is different in different regions. So in South Africa, we also did a similar survey, and we see that developers will be calling themselves senior or tech lead earlier with less years of experience than in the Netherlands. So if you've got an international team, which you probably do have, being in the Netherlands, you will have developers from other regions. So remember, when they say they're a senior dev, that's a different thing region to region. So I think this is quite interesting. It's also probably got something to do with the maturity of the education around software development, but we can also jump into that a bit later. All right, moving on, looking at the average annual salary by seniority. So just to explain this graph, on the y-axis is the average salary, and that's the annual salary in euros, and then the x-axis is buckets of seniority. The range in the background is P25 to P75, so those are the upper and lower quartiles to show you the range, and the graph in the middle is the median. The dotted line in the middle is the median. So juniors, you're looking at a median of about 33,000. Intermediates, 47. Seniors, 60. And tech leads, all the way up to 73. So that we found quite interesting. And we can also jump into that a little bit later. Cool. So the degrees that developers have in the Netherlands, of our respondents, 57% of them had computer science degrees. Second was STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and a whole bunch of other degrees. So if you're one of those that have a humanities degree, you're not alone. You are underrepresented, and there are other people like you. Cool. So where did developers first learn to code? 44% are self-taught. So this is not necessarily where you exclusively learn to code, but where you first learned. So 44 being self-taught, 28 at school, university, and so on. I think what is quite interesting to see is when you break this out by seniority, which is in the report online, that you can see that a lot more of the senior developers are self-taught, and the more juniors are learning at school and at university as software development becomes more formalized into education streams. Whoops, that's not supposed to happen. Give me a second. Cool. We use Looker to process the data. It's a pretty cool tool if you don't use it. Cool. When did developers start coding? You can see that majority starting coding between 13 and 18 years old. Quite a high percentage between below 12 years old, which is also really cool. We're doing a lot right now in the community in both South Africa and the Netherlands around teaching kids to code. We are teaching kids to make, or teaching people who are bringing their kids to make a self-ordering plant with the Arduino ESP8266. And that's a pretty fun thing. It's really cool to see kids like really getting into it. But we all know that coding is a hobby. We'll get into that in a bit, and bringing your kids and being part of that is also just really cool, promoting the next generation. So in line with that, what I said, coding for fun outside of work. This question was, how much do you agree with this statement that you code for fun outside of work, where Heart Eyes Panda is strongly agree and Sad Crying Panda is strongly disagree. So you can see there's quite a high percentage of developers that either agree or strongly agree that they code for fun, 57% of developers. And I was just chatting to the moderator for this tweak is just before we started, he spends his time building IDEs and doing this as a hobby. We are makers, we are crafters, and we both like to craft for work and for fun. And I think it's quite a unique part of our industry. So this was a bit of a fun one. As I mentioned, you can get a tee. We have over 29 designs of tee. I think that's gone up to 31 in the last 2 weeks. And the favorite t-shirt was the "This is a joke" t-shirt, much to our designers' dismay. They spend all their time making really nice designs, and just the plain text font stuff won. But that's quite fun. Remember, you can scan the QR at the end and get a tea if you want. Just to recap, devs in the Netherlands calling themselves senior a little bit later from years of experience than at least South Africa. We don't know what it's like. We don't have the data to compare it against other regions. Salaries rise with career progression. We kind of hope so. So that's pretty obvious. A developer's education is what they make of it. And I think a big part of the word education when it comes to software development, as you and I both know, is pretty loose. Stack Overflow, YouTube are some of the better educators in the world when it comes to our career. And devs are committed to their craft and love what they do. Cool. So at OfferZen, we have account managers who work with the companies that hire on OfferZen. This is Shara. She is actually Kenyan. She lives in South Africa at the moment. And one of the things that she sees that really is an indicator of super successful developers is really like a good portfolio of stuff that they do on the side and the investments that they make into their hobbies. So your tweakers talk about your IDE or your GitHub repo with all your side projects. That's super good. And it's really a good indication of a super solid dev, really good for your career. All right, we're going to move into the future is data. We asked software developers what they believe the most promising industry would be in 5 years' time. And this is quite a massive outlier where AI and cloud computing are 60%. If you're asking why AI and cloud computing are in the same bucket, there's arguments for and against it. This time it happened, and that was the result. But you can see that it's very highly favored as one of the most promising industries. And cybersecurity, obviously, number 2, with fintech, robotics, and climate coming in after that. And cybersecurity, if you've been watching what's happening with solar winds and all that kind of stuff, it'll probably be climbing up pretty fast, in my opinion. But let's see. All right, most desired languages. So quite similar to the kind of AI, ML trends that we're seeing, big move towards data. Python taking the lead by quite a substantial way. Sorry, got distracted by the chat there. Yes, the percentages don't add up to 100. They're not necessarily, these are not the complete list of languages. And in some instances, you could choose more than one. So it's 33% of developers that could choose, of our developers chose Python, but you could choose many. The details of the options are on the online website. Cool. So Python taking the lead there. And what is interesting, if you look at 2019, Python was actually second to TypeScript. And it's actually really just shot out. So that's really cool to see. The actual most used languages, 59% for JS out at the top. Yes, SQL is technically a language, it was part of the survey, but JS really pushing up front. So this is the abbreviated list, and you can check it, the full data on the site. Most used frameworks, you can see all of the JS frameworks and the .NET frameworks really taking the lead there with Node up front. Most desired frameworks, so what are developers wanting to learn? React taking the top spot there, with Vue.js coming in number 2, and TensorFlow making the list, with Node actually moving down to number 4 from number 1, from being the most used to the most desired. So developers, you can see that some of them a lot of developers are desiring to work in languages like Python, but actually are spending their days working with JavaScript and so forth. Now, how does one move from, not necessarily move, but add Python to your skill set? Learning new languages is part of being a software developer, and at a super high frequency. So if you look at this, software developers are learning new languages every few months, once a year, and like over 60% of software developers learning within a year a new language. That's pretty phenomenal. So tech moves fast and devs move fast with it. So the languages, the most popular languages are changing, and developers are learning those languages fast. Devs are keen to work with Python, JS, the most popular language for now. Devs committed to keeping their skills sharp, and backend frameworks remaining popular. I feel like a weatherman. Cool, this is Mikhail. He's also on our team. He is in our curation team, so they manage the marketplace, and they basically say whether you're a legit dev or not to get onto the marketplace, because we don't let everybody on. And he said, and he talks quite a bit about investing in your career to understanding and learning new languages, not necessarily only because you're interested, like, hey, I want to go and learn some functional stuff, but actually also looking at where the trends are going and investing some time in learning those languages. Cool. Jumping on to careers. Alrighty. So what do devs value when thinking about their careers? I think this should resonate with most of us. Challenging projects coming out super high. Number 67% of software developers valuing challenging projects. That is basically one of the defining characteristics in my experience of software developers, is that we like to solve problems and like a challenging project. And there's that old adage that if you want a developer to do something, you tell them it can't be done. Second on the list, new languages and frameworks, and that sits quite nicely with the previous slides that I showed you of these languages moving super fast, high velocity, and being able to kind of learn these and stay up to date, as well as continue to grow and expand your mind. Learning the different types of languages and frameworks can help you pick the best tool for each problem. Cool. When assessing a new opportunity, career opportunity, what are the non-monetary things that they're considering the most? The languages that they'd be working with are part number one, opportunity to grow number two, moving on to company culture and the work they do. But there's a super high correlation, I think, between the languages that people are working with and the opportunity to grow. And you can see that sometimes, or a lot of the case, growing is also very linked to learning new languages. Obviously, learning new paradigms, understanding new ways of thinking. Cool. And to learn a new language, you can learn one on the side and maybe do a side project in that language. But one of the big reasons that software developers move jobs is to kind of move to a newer stack or get move a language from a hobby into the thing that they spend their days doing. So when are the devs that we surveyed looking for their next gig? Quite a few of them in the next 3 to 12 months. Quite a healthy portion of them looking at staying at companies for 2+ years, 5+ years. And the ones that are looking at leaving, why are they leaving? Poor management. So you leave your manager, don't leave a company. That's an important one. We did quite a few reports on remote and conditions of work. And one of the major things around poor management is with amongst developers was a disrespect or not giving people autonomy. I think autonomy is one of the most treasured characteristics of a job that developers are looking for, and poor management, the antithesis of that. So second of all, for a better salary, poor work-life balance. Obviously with Corona, that kind of has changed. This was done in the early days of Corona. It would be great to see how these trends change over time. And lack of growth and or learning opportunities right up there with the rest of them. Cool. And for those that are not moving, why they're staying, subtle difference. People stay a lot for good work-life balance. Again, in our new world, work-life balance has a whole different meaning. But the people that they work with as well, number two, being right up there as the reason that people stay. Because if you found someone that you learn from on a daily basis, that you enjoy tackling problems with, that you like to hang out with, it's always quite nerve-wracking, kind of starting again. Cool. So challenging projects are the key to growth. I think we all know that as makers, we learn through doing, not by watching or reading. I generalize there, but at least that's my experience of it. Poor management is the number one reason for leaving a role. Tech stack and growth are the most important factors when considering a role. Devs are looking to explore new opportunities, and a good work-life balance is the number one to stay at a job. So that's the recap. Remember that all of this stuff is on the online report. I'll drop the link in the chat right at the end, and you can go check it out and shout if you have any questions on that. So Simone, she's a talent advisor, basically a dev career guide, and she talks quite a lot about really asking questions and trying to figure out what it is that each company can offer that when you're looking for a new gig or trying to navigate your career, and really trying to find the places in which you can find the right people and to find the right growth opportunities and challenging projects. And that requires a lot of work, I think. So extensive research, a lot of work, and a lot of asking around. That's something that will get you to the place where you are growing, enjoying yourself, working with people that you love. Or maybe not love, it's probably inappropriate, that you love working with, and kind of moving on from, and really having a career move that you enjoy and that helps you have an impact. Cool. So what's next? Our reports are there. As I said, drop the chat. I'll drop the links in the chat. The reports are also open data, so open source data, and you can just download the data and play around with it and mess with it. If you spot something that we did wrong, please shout. That is not, there's a non-zero chance of that. Obviously, we believe that we learn with the community, but you can download the anonymized data and make some cool stuff and create value for your community or just for the general wider audience. So you can do that on the site as well. And remember, there are some T's that you can claim. You just need to do that and or go to bit.ly/claimswag or scan that thingy and you can get it. That is the data that I have for y'all. I don't actually have much idea of how I did time-wise.
You did excellent, no worries about it. There was one very specific question about the one of the early slides where you showed the average salaries by experience.
Yeah.
And one of the audience members indicated that the your statistics do not include or may not include every information needed. Let me see which one. The average salaries by experience, yeah, this one. And there's especially the questions about stuff like transportation and pension and stuff like that, if that's included in these.
Right, that is not included. That's not included in these metrics. This is the base after tax, pre-tax salary, inclusive of holiday pay.
Okay, well, I think that's a definite answer to that question. Otherwise, just shout out in the chat. And I also see some discussion about, you mentioned developers wanting to learn a new language or switching to another language. How easy that should or is for developers to really switch from languages. I mean, you could do some hobbying in another language, but getting a paid job in a different language might be something a little more challenging.
Yes, I definitely think so. I think one of the problems that we see on a day-to-day basis with companies is that the people hiring don't actually know exactly, they're basically not developers. So they think that the language is like necessarily a hard requirement for intellect or a match for the job. So one of the big pieces of work that we try and do with our companies is explain the dynamic that, look, because this person is, a dev of a certain language doesn't mean that they can't pick another language up quickly. It's language fundamentals, it's logic, it's problem solving, and spotting and being able to assess a developer in a different language is pretty difficult for companies. We try and help them as much as we can there. It's definitely an uphill battle, but we do see a lot of developers that actually cross kind of those barriers. And one of the hacks that they generally do is they just put full stack on their profile.
Right.
It's a bit of a hack. Generally, it does work, even if you're kind of exploring it in your side kind of gigs. The important part of it is to make those side gigs real. So your GitHub repos and the things you can point at are super useful there. And then they say, but you've only got JS in your career. And you can say, yeah, but look at this cool stuff with Kaggle or Python or whatever.
Cool. And you also wanted to know if there were any errors, and somebody mentioned that the Rust icon was the wrong Rust, not the language Rust, but
cool. Yeah, that's very possible. Sorry, I have these slides to give. I must have just been Googling fast and sorry about that.
We all knew what you meant, so no worries about that. But since you explicitly asked for any errors, well, there's been.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Didn't spot that at all. I have not played with Rust personally, so I didn't actually know what I was looking for. But thank you.
To be honest, that's on my wish list as well, Rust. So I kind of like it.
Yeah, we saw some interesting. One of the questions that we asked was which is the most hated developer languages?
Right.
PHP.
Right.
Yes. Good guess. The other thing that we asked was which of the languages. So we pivoted by people that hate their own language the most. And it wasn't the PHP devs, it was the Perl devs, actually.
I can imagine that.
Which is also quite interesting.
I would be very sad developer working in Perl, sorry. At Tweakers, we also use PHP, so that's why I know that it's.
That's your hate.
I like it. I mean, I'm kind of language agnostic. I mean, I've learned a lot of languages, but then again. Yeah. Okay, thanks. We're out of time. We're also out of questions, so that's a very good indication. So thank you very much for a good presentation.
Thanks everyone for coming, and check out the report if you want some stuff. Download the data. Please make some cool stuff, and send it to us or send it to your friends.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks.